Hello there. You are listening to this week's Revenue Insights. I've got something a little bit different for you this week. I've got not one, not two, but three guests, each of them from Mabl. We've got Anthony Palladino, their Chief Revenue Officer, Blake Kelly, their Head of Enablement and Partnerships, and Kirsten Vonck, their Head of Customer Success. And we've been talking for a little while about go-to-market and how to create alignment across your go-to-market teams. That led into this conversation that dug deep into the concept of value hypotheses. It's something that you may have heard of before, but through the conversation, the guys from Mabl explain how they have implemented it across their entire customer journey. The impact that it has had for them, spoiler, is pretty significant. And lastly, some of the advice that they've got for folks that are potentially looking at deploying a framework such as this to create alignment across your different go-to-market teams. One disclaimer that I wanted to add in this little intro is throughout the conversation, there's plenty of pieces that I was trying to visualize in my own head. So they've kindly shared across some different assets and visualizations on the framework that they use that I think you'll find really helpful to really add some color and perspective. Those will be made available on the show notes of this episode, wherever you're listening to it. I think you'll really enjoy this one. Welcome to Revenue Insights. Every week, we'll be joined by revenue leaders from some of the most successful and highest growing companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys that they've been on, and the lessons they have learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by Aisera. We're a revenue intelligence platform designed to help revenue teams to build more pipeline, close more deals, and retain more customers. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Anthony, Blake, Kirsten, lovely to have you on. First, for anyone listening that haven't come across you before, I'd love to hear let's try and keep it under 60 seconds per person. There's three of you. What is your story and how have you got to where you are today?
Yeah, happy to start. So I started off coming out of school actually selling printers at a company called Transact Technologies. And this was back in 2012. So I was initially a sales specialist over there, got promoted into outside sales as I kind of understood the printing space wasn't necessarily going too far from at least the sight line that I had. I wanted to get into the software side of the house. And I made my trek up to Boston here, started working at an SDR agency that outsourced SDRs. And then from there, found a more concrete full-time role in account management and sort of worked my way up through handful of different companies over the past 10 years and eventually landed myself here at Mabl owning the enablement side of the house. So I transitioned from sales over into enablement. I made that transition about 3 years ago and it's been a great one.
Kirsten?
I can go next. I graduated from Quinnipiac University and started my career in a wildly different space as a mental health counselor. So with a psychology background, I was doing that for a bit and quickly recognized that it wasn't quite the right fit for me. And I wanted to find something that still had a really human aspect, but was a bit different in how I connected with folks. I connected with a mentor of mine that was at a company with a really excellent sales training program. Worked there for several years as an account executive, really getting myself into a sales space, and then made my foray into the SaaS technical world at Datadog. Again, was really trying to find a company that had a strong education program, a strong professional development program for someone coming into the space. And that's something Datadog is really known well for, is their technical training and the way that they train their sales reps. So I was there for an account executive for a period of time before making my transition into customer success. I loved being an account executive, but found my skill set really more aligning with the long-term strategy that you can provide customers. I wanted to get a little bit away from the transactional aspect of mid-market sales work and have been in customer success ever since. Spent some time at VMware as a customer success manager prior to coming to Mabl, where I was an enterprise customer success manager and was recently promoted into the head of customer success role. So myself also have a bit of a background across the go-to-market space. I'm really passionate about seeing this alignment between customer success and account executives just from my personal journey, and seeing how well these two aspects of a business can collaborate and work together is something that really gets me excited. So
Amazing. Congrats on the promotion.
Thank you.
Last but absolutely not least, Anthony.
Thanks, Lee. Good to see you, buddy. Thanks for having us today. Yeah, I actually started out of college in banking at a pretty large company at the time called MBNA America. pretty quickly realized that being part of a 20,000 person company was probably not where I was going to have the most fun and impact, but transitioned to technology and was fortunate to have been with a bunch of different technology companies, but really had a lot of fun at Blade Logic and part of John McMahon's leadership team, and then at BMC. And I went to Splunk pre-IPO, ran Americas for about $1 billion, and been involved with some other companies before coming here to Mabl. So in leading go-to-market teams. So having a lot of fun and great to be here today and catching up on some pretty cool topics we think that are unique.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for coming on. And you said it there. What we're going to talk about today is go-to-market and go-to-market more generally. And I'm excited to dig into, because you, by the sounds of it, have quite a unique and interesting approach to go-to-market. And so to start our conversation today, Anthony, I want to come to you first. As CRO, you're kind of heading up the vision for what the go-to-market is and the focus. So can you just give a bit of context for how you approach go-to-market and what is unique about your approach?
Yeah. I think we at Mabl, we're pretty fortunate. We're in low-code test automation. We're in a great spot in that the market has a significant need for what we do. We're automating a process that takes this long and costs this much into making it like this and like this. So we've got a great technology. We've got hundreds of pretty amazing customers across the world, Fortune 500, startups, everything in between. But we have a great technology. We think we have some great people. But the question is, how do we engage in a way so customers can say, that is pretty cool. We do like those folks. So our focus is on having conversations that customers can walk into and say, super credible, super high value. And this is a problem that's worth solving for us. So we're trying to focus on sharing our vision, getting the customer to be in a position to say, this is going to be one of the most valuable investments, if not the most valuable investment that we make across our entire technology organization. That's my thought. So how do we drive from the initial discussion, hello, how are you, into a PO? How do we make that as compressed as possible, super high value based on ROI, based on impact, and then we lead through that with customer success, because then that yields continued growth and good success. So we just ultimately want to be the most valuable investment that a company is making in anywhere across their business.
So how do you do that? What kind of the key pillars, let's say, of that focus?
I think it starts with how we engage with a customer and our mindset before we even pick up the phone or jump on a video to talk with a customer or meet with them in person. I think Blake and Kirsten can give some color on that, but it starts with what we call a value hypothesis.
Who wants to jump in?
I think,
Sure.
Yeah,
happy to explain more around ultimately what a value hypothesis is. And I think it's only fair that I give a shout out to somebody I worked with in the past. His name was Chris Lynch over at Drift, and he introduced this concept to us initially. And I've taken it with my career and sort of run with it from here. And it's really was an aha moment in learning how to employ a value hypothesis, how to use one, and how it helps achieve some of the things that Anthony's talking about around building credibility upfront, making sure that we're driving a good consultative engagement with our customers. So a value hypothesis, if we look at the definition that we've pulled together on it, what we call value hypothesis, or how we define it, is it's a thoughtful, research-backed estimate around the value that Mabl can provide our customers and prospects at a business level, team level, and or individual level. So there's a lot to break down in that definition, but ultimately what it is, it's our ability as a go-to-market team, as reps and CSMs, to go in, do some thorough research on these customers or prospects that we're working with, and come to the call when we meet with them with a perspective, what we think we can do or how we can provide them value specifically. And I can continue on here, Lee. I don't know if I should just keep it rolling or you jump in with questions, but
I think there's so much to dig into here. And I suppose where probably for me to understand it better, but also for the audience to understand it better, is can perhaps Blake and Kirsten talk me through kind of end to end what that looks like? So I understand, for example, where does the research come into it? And what does that look like from each stage of the customer journey? Because we're not only talking about pre-sales, right? This is actually extending into customer success, which I'm super intrigued around, because my approach, and I'm sure many people listening to this will have a very traditional point of view, which is you're getting that information off the back of a discovery call and asking questions. So before we dig too much deeper, I'd love to hear kind of what that looks like end to end for Mabl.
Yeah, absolutely. I can talk about the pre-sales aspect of it. And then Kirsten, maybe you can jump in and share how your team uses it. But from the pre-sales side, let's say we're meeting with a customer for the first time, or a prospect for the first time, I should say. We know maybe a couple of things about them. Maybe they filled out a form on the website. They want to have a trial. They want some pricing, or maybe it's cold outreach. But in those situations where somebody's reaching out to us on the website and has an expectation of what they're going to get from the call when they jump on, whether it's pricing, whether it's a demo, whatever it may be, we have to take an opportunity to make sure that we can help navigate that conversation. We're not just jumping on, showing a demo, and then closing out the meeting, right? We want to make sure that we show up again with a perspective. So what we're doing is we're going on things like job postings. We're looking at 10K reports. We're looking at LinkedIn. We're looking at any previous engagements that maybe they had with us anywhere in our marketing material, right? Or maybe there was an open opportunity previously that we can tap on. We're looking at the individuals that are joining the call and maybe some of the things that they care about. If you look on LinkedIn, you'll get a pretty good sense of what folks care about and if they're using certain technologies, which is valuable to us, right? One of the things that we do is we help replace open source testing models because they take a lot of time to maintain. They take a lot of time to develop tests. So if we know that they're using one of those before we go into the conversation, it gives us a really good thread to pull on when we get in. So when we're chatting with a customer and they say, hey, came on, want to get a demo, want to get some pricing, great, we'll absolutely get to that. Before we jump in, we actually have some research and some stuff that we've looked up on your account. And I want to share with you a little bit around how I think we can provide you value, right? If that's okay with you, we can jump in. If not, right? So you start off the call with the upfront contract, insert the value hypothesis. And then from there, you're either going to be right or wrong. It's a hypothesis, right? And most times you're going to be wrong, to be completely honest. You might be half right. You might be 75% right, but it's rare that somebody nails it 100%. And that's perfectly okay, because what it means is it gives the customer an opportunity to correct you, to say, hey, you have a couple of these things right. Great research, by the way. Is there, maybe you missed the trick here or there, or there was something that you didn't have quite right, and it's actually this instead. And that's just, the tenor of that conversation is just so much different than if you go in without that type of information, without that thought out hypothesis of what they care about. And you get to a point where you're just going down a line of questioning, doing discovery, doing something canned. And that doesn't help build the energy that Anthony was talking about earlier. It actually sucks the energy out of people in a lot of instances, right? So we're looking to combat that with this kind of framework. That's it on the pre-sale side. And Kirsten has some situations where it's really valuable on the post-sale side as well.
Yeah, and to talk through some of that on the customer success side of things, I think the most important piece is that there's a little bit of a conception that once someone becomes a customer, you stop selling. That's certainly not the case, right? We actually want to be providing value and living in this world of value hypothesis and value delivery for the entirety of the customer journey. So it's really important to us at Mabl that we have this pervasive experience for our customers, that doesn't stop on the day that they sign the contract. So one of the most important ways that we see CSMs applying this is, first of all, just carrying over the original value hypothesis at time of kickoff with the customer. Right? We're taking the learnings from the account executive and using that as a way to inform the way we onboard the customer. Every one of our customers receives a customized onboarding experience, and understanding that value hypothesis and the problem statement that it led to gives the CSMs a lot of context about what should I be prioritizing when I come onto this call with the customer, not having to rediscover at time of kickoff, because I have a great understanding of that problem statement, and the content that I've created is with that in mind. Some of the other really big ways that we see CSMs doing this is within quarterly business reviews or executive business reviews. These are the alignment calls that our CSMs are doing with our customers to show what is the value we've delivered over time, and aligning with the executives that they work with on now what do we focus on going forward if we've either achieved or not achieved what we've set out to do at this time. Now, when we're going into a QBR, we have our CSMs kind of redo that value hypothesis, because these things are not stagnant. Businesses don't stay the same forever. And you could have a customer that's been with us for 2-3 years. And the things that the business is going to be focused on 2 years after close is going to be quite different. So it's important for CSMs to kind of be redoing this exercise. Blake talked a little bit about 10K. That's something that CSMs use to inform the way they prepare for QBRs pretty significantly, right? Because each earnings report, the goals of the business are different, which means the goals of their use of our software are going to be different. And again, it really helps to our CSMs to build credibility with the customer. They've come in and showed that they've ongoing on an ongoing basis, they've kept up with what's important to the business. They understand the business. It builds credibility. It also builds a lot of confidence with our reps. There's less that they need to think about on the fly because they've done research to understand the business. And there's less on the spot thinking that folks have to do, right? Because they understand the problems that the business is looking to solve. It leads for much more engaged QBRs. And this is also something that's great to do with an unengaged customer. I'd love to live in a super happy world in which every customer is incredibly happy and talking to us on a weekly basis, but that's not always the case. And so you have to do some reprospecting with these unengaged customers. And if you get that opportunity to have an at-bat with an executive, this is an incredible exercise to be able to do to make sure that that opportunity you have, you knock it out of the park. And then lastly, for a CSM perspective, with at-risk customers, maybe you have someone that's a bit of a detractor, someone that's looking to leave the business. Being able to do a value hypothesis of what value you continue to deliver to this business about why they should remain with Mabl is huge. It informs all of the at-risk plans our customers put into play when we receive a cancellation request. And it's really important for us to be able to rally the resources we might need to retain a customer. We don't want to just be sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall. You want to be really mindful about whose help do I need and why to be able to retain this customer.
Just a quick reminder, and then we will be right back to the show. At Revenue Insights, our goal is to share how top-performing revenue leaders build predictable, efficient, go-to-market teams. Every week, we speak to the brightest minds, and every quarter, we release the latest findings from our analysis of billions of dollars in pipeline. If you don't want to miss out, sign up to our newsletter at ebster.com/newsletter-sign-up. That's ebster.com/newsletter-sign-up. The link to make that a little bit easier for you will be in the show notes of this episode, wherever you're listening. See you there. Amazing. That is now very vivid in my mind. I can almost picture like the end-to-end process. And well, actually near enough, because I probably should, the one somewhat self-indulgent question is, does this tie in with your marketing efforts at the very top of the funnel as well? Or does it only come in kind of at the pre-sales stage?
Yeah, absolutely ties in the marketing efforts. We're leveraging as much insight as we can get into signs of demand, right? And indicators of what might be happening. And we look at external factors. We look at communication with us on the website. We're looking at MQLs and we're looking at activity related to us and grouping it by company. So then with that value hypothesis, before we've even engaged, we're actually doing a very targeted engagement potential or prospecting for it. So we're doing that research on accounts before we're even talking with them. And we're doing that to really understand. We do a lot of deconstruction on what's worked really well, what resonated really well, what's driven highest ROI, highest value, and then translating that back into outgoing messaging. So we're doing it full cycle and all of go-to-market.
Beautiful. And so much of this to me feels like it, I guess the success of it almost maybe, no, I was going to say lives or dies, but that might be a little bit extreme, but it's so dependent on that research in the first place, right? Having quality data and insight from wherever you are gathering it from to really be able to inform not only the pre-sales process, but also when it gets into post-sales as well. So you kind of Blake, you gave an example of a number of different data sources that you're pulling into it. But question to each of you, which would you say is the most valuable data source that goes into the research that you're doing?
Yeah. From my perspective, it's the LinkedIn profile usually has a lot of great stuff. Actually, I'll give you three just because it's hard to pick one. So
all the good answers, Blake. Come on.
Maybe. Yeah. Hopefully I don't take away any from Kirsten and Anthony, but the LinkedIn profile, the job postings are also very helpful for us because if we can see, all right, this customer's ramping up in their QA, they're ramping up in their development, it gives us a little bit of sense as to some stuff that they might be working on that we can help out with. And then the final piece that I'll throw out there is what are their executives saying? And you can find that out through LinkedIn, right? So it's kind of that answer, but executives will also post stuff online. Maybe they've done a podcast like this. Maybe they've done a presentation at an event somewhere, and they're sharing in a lot of instances what their strategic initiatives are, right? So we can then take those sound bites and that information and use it to craft our messaging. So hopefully I didn't steal any.
I'm also going to copy Blake and give a couple because I find it really difficult to narrow it down to just one as well. So really big ones from us on the customer side are going to be how are our customers interacting with our platform? So using a tool that we leverage called Pendo, we're able to see on a click level, how do folks interact with our tool, which can be a great indicator of what problems are they trying to solve with Mabl. You can learn quite a lot from that, how are customers actually interacting with us. And one that's a little bit different, but we get some really interesting information from. When we think about Mabl's a testing automation tool, right? So if someone is not testing their application or website, that means the end user is having a poor experience. So put yourself in the shoes. Maybe you're trying to book something online. You're using Ticketmaster, you're trying to buy Taylor Swift tickets, and the site is crashing. What's your immediate inclination? To go on Twitter and light that company up. We can find a lot of great information on what are people saying about the businesses that we work with? What's their experience been? Because if they're experiencing poor end user experience, a poor time using this company's application, they're going to talk about it. And that's going to really inform how Mabl can help them. So we do a lot of social research, I would say, to be able to tie back to the business on this is what we can improve for you. So we learn a lot that way as well. And 10K reports, of course, that's going to be a more business-minded approach to what the company is focused on. But I love seeing what people are saying on Twitter about the folks that we work with.
I just want to say, we noted that Kirsten did refer to Taylor Swift tickets, right? Like, Kirsten, I know, you just kind of wove that one in very quietly. No, everybody got it. We know.
I'm not going to lie, it actually really helped me with the understanding of it. So we've all been there, right? Trying to get Taylor Swift tickets.
Right. Right. And think about how Ticketmaster was in the news.
No, I was going to share, I have a little bit of a different perspective on it, Lee, too. A couple things. One, when you think about a hypothesis is not a definitive answer. It's looking at a couple of different data points and then basing on judgment, drawing some type of conclusion, right? So what I think is really, really important as a go-to-market team when we're engaging with a customer on that hypothesis, and I have another point on the hypothesis I wanted to share, but is that we have a really good understanding of where our technology has driven value for other companies. Because if we're bringing in some customer examples of the impact we've had in another place, our hypothesis can be, hey, you have a similar environment, this many users, similar application profile, or similar number of developers, whatever the case might be. Hey, we've worked with a similar company, similar industry, similar size, similar scale, similar use case from what we've been able to see. Here's the impact we've driven there. Here's what we think this impact might be able to be similar for you. So that understanding, focusing a lot on what the product can do, impact of the product, the actual customer use case. And we're very fortunate. We're driving like 80% improvement and ROIs that are happening within 3-4 months type of thing. So we've got a lot of that. And Blake and Kirsten lead their teams in a way where people are really making sure we're super mindful of that. I think that's a critical component, because what's interesting too about this hypothesis, just to kind of digress on this a little bit, the concept of doing external research and learning about a company is not new. That's years ago. We taught things about value pyramids and the great concept to get an understanding. The challenge with those things is that they're all about the customer impact, focused on growing your market share, you're focused on competitive advantage and reducing cost. Great. The issue is the translation of what they're trying to do to your technology. Our value hypothesis takes that another layer, multiple layers deeper into saying, based on all these things, based on our technology, here's the translation of it. And when you have a hypothesis, as Blake has shared earlier, it's very easy to then, I think of open-ended questions versus multiple choice. There's a time for open-ended questions, but it's not early discovery. Like, that's just insulting to customers, right? Well, if you had a magic wand, oh my gosh, I had hair when I first started hearing that question. I think that's what caused me to lose my hair. That question itself, right? Because it's just insulting. You haven't done your research. But if you come in and say, hey, based on your understanding, these are the couple things that I think might be super relevant for you, very easy to edit. It's much easier to edit a paper than it is to write one. I know this because my son is giving me all his papers to edit all the time. Sometimes it's more writing. That's a little bit hard. But that's very easy to edit something, right? And then we're bringing that to the customer. It's kind of a little bit of a sigh of relief because they're coming in and saying, no, let me direct you in the right way. It's also showing some vulnerability, right? To say, hey, we don't know if we're 100% right, 20% right, but the goal is not being right. The goal is making sure we're aligned with you. So it's a different showing other customers that may be similar that's where I think we really gain some good credibility. And that's all honest stuff, right? Those are metrics, those are facts, those are stories, they're customer specific, they're posted on our website. So
I think it's a really nice and actually really valid digression in many ways, because I think so often in my own experience, there isn't necessarily the alignment in terms of, now if I put my marketer's hat on, in terms of our messaging from one end of the customer journey right the way through to the other end. And I think so often as well, I mean, you spoke to it that with kind of tailored messaging and personalized messaging, there's something that people have been trying to do for quite a while. But how often is that personalized messaging something along the lines of, "Hi, Anthony, I saw that you're a CRO at this company," or it's, I saw that you wrote this thing on LinkedIn." And that's where the giving a damn kind of ends, right? The personalization ends at that point. And it's like, well, you kind of you put about 10% of the effort in to be able to, you've probably used some kind of sales engagement software to insert that bit, and then you've sent this out to 100 different people. I would imagine that it's a completely different conversation where it's like, we've actually put time and effort into trying to understand you. And as a human, and I guess as a buyer, that's a completely different experience, which is, I can see the effort that these guys are going into. Okay, they're actually kind of half the way off and they misinterpreted my LinkedIn post. I was actually being really sarcastic at the time, whatever it might be. And I can picture quite clearly in my mind how that turns into a very different conversation, because it's all about collaboration. And I think you said it, Blake, earlier. It's more like a consultative approach, which is certainly something that has come up quite a lot over the last 6 months. And that's what folks are really trying to achieve. And I suppose as a buyer, it's probably very nice to see. We're actually having to try to identify not only what it is, the challenges that you've got, but matching it together with a solution of how we might solve that. So, for example, so you can finally get your Taylor Swift tickets, for example. So I know you guys sell into enterprise primarily, but do you think that the value hypothesis is relevant to companies selling into mid-market and commercial? If so, why?
Yeah, it's relevant to anybody selling anything, in my opinion. I mean, to a degree, right? Any B2B sales where you have a moment to actually do some research before your customer meeting, this would be valuable. There's no question around it. And I think the reason is that it differentiates you, right? There's a couple of things it does that we didn't get an opportunity to talk about, but I think one of the things is it differentiates you in your approach. On a competing podcast with yours, maybe I heard the other day that a CIO was talking about, this is a CIO at a major bank, by the way, right? He was talking about how often reps would get in front of him and give them a canned sales pitch. And he would almost just cut the conversation immediately because he's like, I've heard all this before. You're telling me about my industry. I already know about my industry. I'm paid to know about my industry. Tell me what I don't know. Long story short with that is that if you are one of the few reps who is actually spending time to build up a hypothesis and actually deliver value and actually care enough to pull this together and share something that they can do something with, or something that teaches them something, you're going to be putting yourself in a competitive advantage. So that's why I think it's applicable to any seller. If obviously if you're on floor sales or car sales, it's a totally different story. You don't have time to develop a value hypothesis. Maybe you can look at what the person's wearing and kind of maybe make a guess, or so. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. But if you're in B2B sales, you absolutely should be spending time doing this. At a minimum, you should be doing it before every call at some level. And then for your really, really big opportunities where maybe you do have that economic buyer who's getting on the call, or you have that title that you've really been going after, like you should spend a good amount of time pulling the threads and figuring out where the value should live for them. So,
and I think another aspect is just because the size or the band of business changes doesn't mean that business isn't having challenges that they're looking to solve, right? Like mid-market customers have as many challenges as enterprise customers. And the point is less about the size of the business and more about showing that you're a trusted advisor to them and that you're spending the time educating yourself about them as a company. And I don't think that alters based on the company's size. We see quite a bit. We work with mid-market customers as well. We see this have just as strong applications. So Blake's point too, it's also about the title that you're meeting with, right? And making sure that you respect that individual's time and that you're demonstrating that. I think especially post-sales, right? When we're asking to continuously meet with them, we need to make sure that we're bringing something fresh and making the meeting worth their while every time we meet with them in perpetuity. So it's really important to be able to deliver that.
I want to ask something. I'm going to come to you, Kirsten, because it's very much on the post-sales perspective.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the role that kind of the value hypothesis plays at that stage for you. And so does that weave into the account plans that you have with your customers, or does it replace it?
I would say it weaves into it. I think it informs it, right? So we would do both, right? The way that when we do the value hypothesis, sort of the next step that we do after that value hypothesis is it informs a problem statement, right? So based on that value hypothesis, we can assert that this is the challenge, the problem that this business is trying to solve. And then the account plan is really doing the same thing, right? We've come to this problem statement, and with this account plan, via this account plan, I'm looking to, as your partner and trusted advisor, get you to a place where you've achieved success against that problem statement. For customers in our space, it could be things, I referenced, we'll go back to the Ticketmaster example, right? You want to have a really positive end user experience. You want to have no downtime. You want to have no escape bugs, et cetera, right? So then my account plan, now that I have that problem statement determined, right? Great customer experience. My account plan is going to be all activities that tie us back to solving that problem statement. So I think they kind of fit in together. I would say almost like this value hypothesis problem statement is the framework that our account plans are built on.
Does it get refreshed when the account renews?
I would say more frequently than that. I think we refresh our account plans, I would say more like on a quarterly basis, right? We have an executive business review with a customer, which we, especially with our larger enterprise businesses, are trying to deliver on a quarterly basis. The outcome of that meeting and what we've learned on that meeting because of the research we put into it is going to almost sometimes entirely change that account plan, right? Like we're going to come away with a new understanding of what the areas of focuses are going to be. So as long as we are having that meeting on a frequent basis, the account plan is changing just as frequently.
Amazing. We've talked a lot on value hypotheses, and I feel like the impression I get is that it's running like a well-oiled machine currently. So what next? Are you kind of done iterating with value hypotheses? What I'm curious to know is, are you looking to develop that into other areas, or is there another kind of project that you're really passionate about that you're working on at the minute?
It's a great question. I think the way I look at the value hypothesis and the way we can keep iterating on it, right, is there's this whole AI boom that we have out there right now gives us actually a lot of opportunities from a technology perspective to improve the way that we collect and develop our value hypothesis. So that's the next iteration of it in my mind. Like, how do we actually take the time that our reps are spending doing research a little bit out of their hands and have something that can help us provide a value hypothesis or provide the information we need to build one through leveraging a research tool or something like that. So that's my thought on the value hypothesis side. We're always working on other stuff though. So I don't know, Kirsten and Anthony might have some other commentary on that.
Yeah, I think just sort of iterative nature is what additional content and things that we can deliver to customers as we continue to work on this is going to be our focus from the customer success side, right? I've talked a lot about executive business reviews, but maybe it's things like on-site workshops that we're able to deliver using some of our technical resources. How do we drive adoption using this problem statement? I think we have a lot of, are we delivering value and checking in on this on an ongoing basis? But now, like tactically, can we use value hypothesis to inform some of the things, like I said, workshops, onboarding sessions, training? Those are some areas that would be exciting to explore.
Yeah. And if we take a step back, right, and think about our approach in go-to-market, our sales methodology, our approach, it's really what we call champion-based selling. And champion-based selling is all about identifying, building, and testing multiple champions throughout the entire life cycle and doing that as soon as possible and making sure we're doing a great job for people to emotionally and logically effectively fight for us when we're not there. So if you think about that overarching focus, and then you think about the mission statement that we have on go-to-market to make the most effective and most valuable technology investment period, or even investment period, value hypothesis is where it starts. In the first engagement, we're putting together problem statements. The problem statements is a customer and Mabl defined way of articulating what problem we're going to solve now, why this is a critical problem, what happens if we don't do it. That came about after years of net thinking of CFO is what is the problem? So we're anticipating every dollar that gets spent needs to go to the CFO, and we're making sure we're articulating the problem to solve in the problem statement in a CFO ready way to consume. Like, so the CFO says, hey, I'm a little mad for two reasons. One, that I'm hearing about it now, and two, that you haven't solved it. Go fix it with Mabl. Like, so then you think about the problem statement, value hypothesis leading into problem statement. In this concept that we have on our go-to-market, we're driving what we call compelled energy in that first dialogue. And compelled energy is, we have a definition of it. I don't know if Blake wants to share it in a minute, but that's how where customers are leading that conversation, saying, this is a really important thing to fix now. This Mabl technology, hey, it's early. We had one meeting. If it does what I think, this is awesome. And I'm going to make an opportunity cost decision. We go spend time and really validate this fits for my environment. So value hypothesis, problem statement, driving compelled energy. And one of the other things we're focused on too, we do a lot of things with AI that are already embedded in our product with generative AI, expert systems, multiple types of machine learning. So we're bringing that to the forefront and making sure we're helping customers to understand how that can affect the problem that they're solving. So we're having some fun with it and building on all of these pieces are kind of interlinked, right? In terms of ultimately driving that experience that we're trying to drive on the customer side. So you think about what we do, what's next, it's all about iteratively building those new things. And we have new products we're offering, bringing them in and putting them through the same framework. So it's been pretty well received by the team. And we think our customers are good proof of it.
What I like is it almost sounds like the value hypothesis almost operates as kind of like a steel beam in a house in many ways, right? That's the consistent piece that is really holding everything else together pretty much, right? And you're actually off that original piece is what you're building many other parts of the go-to-market process and the go-to-market strategy off the back of. So you mentioned around like champion selling.
Champion selling.
For example, would that mean the value hypothesis perhaps would be different based on different personas that you're testing as a champion?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the value hypothesis is very specific to the customer, to the problem that's solved, to being solved, and to that environment. We're fortunate in that we're working with very large Fortune 500s, and the reason they're starting an initiative may be very different from a startup with Series B funded. Series B funded, speed, release time, cycles, startup, cost, quality, governance, consistency, framework. So you have to have a different value hypothesis for those environments because the technology ultimately drives quality, cost, process improvement, productivity, AI into production and use case that has huge value, better customer user experience, NPS, but each customer may have a different order of those or may be tied to one or the other. The other point, though, we mentioned earlier that I wanted to just call out was the word consultatively. So, and Blake had used it, but it was an implicit comment that I think is really, really important to know. So our sales process, by driving a value hypothesis and by building really good compelled energy and having a solid problem statement that the customer aligns with and they own internally, is what makes our process consultative. Okay. If you think about this, you think about the concept of a consultant. If you're a company bringing in a consultant, you make a decision about what problem you want to solve. And then you say, who am I going to get to give me the best insight, domain expertise, and cultural engagement, way of operating. Okay. But you're analyzing that, making a decision about when and if you want to engage in a consultative way. Okay. If you're approaching a customer, assuming that they're just going to be consultative with you and tell you all their problems because the first time meeting them off the street, that's never going to work. For us, in order to create a consultative way of engaging, we're putting a lot of work in on the front end so that then the process does become consultative. It becomes a two-way street. It becomes a really good and open dialogue. So I think that's an important thing to assume there is that we're not assuming that the customers made the decision to ask us to be a consultant with them. We have to earn that. That's where Blake was really digging in early on the credibility, and Kirsten was talking about maintaining and building that credibility throughout the entire life cycle of the subscription. And that's not something that's given, that's earned. So it's an older school way of thinking, solution selling. Hey, come in, just ask them a bunch of questions. They're going to love you because of the quality of questions. Absolute bullshit. Like maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, not now. People are getting 60, 70%, 80% of their analysis done before they talk to you. Maybe even more because you can have an open trial. And people are very educated. Great, beautiful. We have to get educated too before we engage with them because they're already educated on us. So that consultation, that invitation to be consultative has to be earned. And that's what we're doing.
Just a quick reminder, and then we will be right back to the show. At Revenue Insights, our goal is to share how top-performing revenue leaders build predictable, efficient go-to-market teams. Every week, we speak to the brightest minds, and every quarter, we release the latest findings from our analysis of billions of dollars in pipeline. If you don't want to miss out, sign up to our newsletter at ebster.com/newsletter-sign up. That's ebster.com/newsletter-sign up. The link to make that a little bit easier for you will be in the show notes of this episode, wherever you're listening. See you there.
It's an excellent point, right? And from my perspective, an excellent point, because I think the word that was coming to my head was trust, and the trust that you are building up with a buyer, right? Even if they're coming in via like an inbound demo request and they're raising their hand saying, yeah, I want to see it. They're not necessarily like, yeah, I want to buy today, right? Particularly not in the enterprise space. And actually that a traditional discovery process can very much mirror an interrogation at times. Often as a seller, we think that comes from a good place because it's like, I'm trying to understand you so I can prescribe the best solution to you. But that's
mismatch.
Not necessarily always the case. I suppose there's always, as the buyer, it's always in the back of your mind of, well, I know why they're trying to help me, right? And that's not necessarily the case for most sellers, right? There's that genuine desire to actually help to solve the challenges that they have. But it's building up, to your point, building up that trust between the two and showing like we are committed to this relationship, this partnership, to actually, we are showing that we are making the effort to actually build this out and actually solve the problem together.
To kind of tie it back to some of the things we were talking about at the beginning when it comes to the more traditional style of discovery, right? When you are just asking lines of question, it puts the onus on them, more on them than on us to be a part of that partnership, right? All of the heavy lifting is on them telling you. When you take this approach, it makes it much more of a partnership activity.
Absolutely.
And Lee, when we're driving compelled energy, which is what we're trying to drive early on, if the customer draws a conclusion that this looks like it's a really great technology based on the ROI, the impact, the way that these guys are engaging, they're focused on problem-centered communication, then guess what? They're making a decision to say, I want to try to address this problem. Hey, Mabl, I need your help. That's a whole different type of discussion. That's a consultative discussion. And it's learning about their environment, but it's learning about their environment in the context of what we may know, what the product can do, and what they're saying with us. And then that becomes, your discovery is not discovery. Your discovery is communication around how we can facilitate this process in the fastest way with the highest impact. So just to comment on this, our point is not to do traditional understanding of the customer environment. We're doing that upfront on our own. We're validating that. But then that what might be traditional discovery of really digging into those questions. But from our approach, customers are giving us that input, and then we're clarifying things. If we've built a good value hypothesis, a nice problem statement driven compelled energy, then we have a different dialogue and we're clarifying points, we're having a discussion. To Kirsten's point, it's not an interrogation. We're sitting on the same side of the table thinking about, okay, here we're going to map out this process. And then we're collaborating. And that's a much better user experience, a much better customer experience, much better buying experience, and we think facilitates a much better relationship and successful partnership down the road.
Since bringing it in, have you seen I suppose what I'm getting at is, have you seen a tangible impact? I think it's very hard to be able to say, yeah, we brought it in and if our win rate's 3x or our sales cycles are 50% shorter, whatever it may be. But have you been able to see that since getting it established and obviously getting everyone on board with it, a tangible upside off the back of it?
I'll answer and then I'll let the team share an example or two. Shorter answer is absolutely. And I don't want to share too many specifics, but to give you a couple areas. Number one, sales cycle time. So we actually close quite a bit of business where we create it, open the opportunity, close the opportunity within quarters. Pretty unique because we're selling enterprise software, number one. Number two, average selling price. And we're not trying to jack up prices. We're not trying to overload customers because a lot of times we're doing multi-year transactions. You drive a really good value hypothesis. You drive a really strong problem statement. Build good compelled energy. You build strong champions, multiple champions. Your transaction gets broader, bigger, faster. And the ultimate net kind of lagging indicator is actual productivity of the team, where people are hitting their numbers. And that's a big thing we've been focused on. And again, I don't want to share specifics, but some of our actual attainment against quota is industry highest. That's exciting. That's exciting for the people, and that builds great culture. That builds great team. People are earning well. building good customer relationships. Customers are taking us to other parts of their companies or moving into new companies. So we've seen some pretty good net impact on it, and largely from leadership that Blake's been putting out and Kirsten's been putting out on a daily.
Yeah, on the post-sale side, I would say it's been very impactful in our churn number, right? So we measure churn on a gross dollar retention rate metric. And since the input of these processes, we've seen our churn significantly reduce, right? And I think that's really tied back into some of the predominant churn reasons that we see. And these aren't specific to Mabl, these are industry-related churn reasons like champion turnover, right? You have your person leave the company. That's going to require you to go through this exercise again. And if you have a playbook like this at the ready for one of the most common churn reasons, like champion turnover, your ability to implement an effective action plan is much, much tighter. So we're really seeing a lot of positive impact in that area as a result.
Amazing. I have one final question. I feel like there's probably a lot of people listening going, whoa, I want a slice of that pie. That sounds good. What would be the one piece, we can go round, what would be the one piece of advice you give to someone that's perhaps been inspired by this conversation and is interested in rolling out value hypotheses themselves?
Yeah, I would say my bit of advice is take a look at what signals work best for your business and for your industry, right? I think there's some common ones. Looking at LinkedIn, looking at job postings, all that is really helpful. Maybe there are other metrics or other things that you have the ability to look at or monitor around what your customers are doing that could be specific more to you. And I'll give you an example of that, right? I used to work at a marketing company in a past life. And one of the things that we wanted to do was try to understand what technology that they were using from a marketing perspective. And we had a tool, I forget the name of it, but we were basically able to go on their website and see exactly what they were using for their marketing stack. That's not something that we can do here, but if that's something that is specific to that organization I was at, and maybe to other ones that are listening. So that would be one big piece of advice I have, is that you can get specific with this for your customers, for your industry, for your business. So I'll stop at that one.
That's a great one.
I think the one that I would share is when it comes to enablement and how we empower the reps within our organization, we do a lot of like call coaching, and we have things like gold standard calls. So the piece of advice that I would have would be really share your success stories. Change in implementing a process can be challenging for folks at any number of times, but what I found really going through the implementation of this process is when you have that confidence that the research builds, we see our calls go incredibly well. And is there anything more intoxicating than really crushing a call and like getting on a call and the work that you've done has really created a great opportunity for you? And we saw that a lot when we did this. And it was just really cool to watch the reps get excited and kind of be fighting to be the one to share the gold standard call of like, oh, look how on point my value hypothesis was. Look how great this QBR went because of the work that I did. And if we spend the time sharing those successes across the organization, more and more folks want to start doing it and they want to start doing it well. So that would be my piece of advice here.
Love that.
I've got a couple things. Number one, if you're a customer facing person, number one, build your credibility, which means learning your product really well. It means learning your customer examples really well. Build your own credibility completely within your control. And your organization, your team should be there. You might have to search for some resource. You might have to seek people out, but get your shit together. Build your credibility, number one. Number two, do your homework. Be prepared. Once you have your own credibility, you know your own product, you know your own environment, understand the customer's environment, do the research, look for the little things. Blake and Kirsten talked about this. Look for the LinkedIn posts, look for what people are saying, look at all the sources you can. Get a feel for the company, right? Get a feel, but you have to do that homework. Number three, be confident once you have your credibility, once you've done your homework, but also be empathetic with the customer, with their environment, with what they're dealing with. They have a day job. You potentially can automate and save a lot of time in their day job, but being able to lift their head and focus on strategically where they're going to go, you have to be empathetic to them and be understanding of that. Don't waste their time. Like, understand they're running a shop. And you have to be empathetic to that. That actually helps build your credibility with the customer. The fourth thing is and all of these are all within your control. The fourth one is own it. Absolutely own it. Anything that happens, it's on your watch. You can drive this. We focus a lot on linearity, how much business you can close within the quarter. And we have expectations month one, month two, month three. That doesn't happen because the customer says, I'm only going to wait till the end of the quarter. That happens when you let it happen. So you have to drive that and you can own that. All these things are all within your control. So if you're a go-to-market person, build your credibility, do your homework, have that confidence, be empathetic about it, and then own it. It's all within your control,
Sage advice all round. I don't think I've ever had so many people, whenever I ask, please name one thing, name quite so many things afterwards. However, I do.
Sorry,
it was worth it.
We're great at following directions.
You follow your own process absolutely seamlessly, but not this. That's all good. Guys, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience and teaching us a little bit more about value hypotheses. For one final sign off for each of you, for anyone that's listening, that's perhaps they might have specific questions, maybe on the pre-sale side, post-sale side, on the overarching go-to-market side. One last time, go round. Where can they find you? Is there any way that they can contact you?
Yeah, great question. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to chat around this stuff with anybody who's willing. So you can find me there. I can share over my URL to you, Lee, if it's something that comes up as part of this when you share out the episode. But LinkedIn for me.
I've already found you. It will be in the show notes below by the time anyone is listening to this.
And I'll plus one that LinkedIn is definitely the best place to reach me as well. Kirsten Vonck at Mabl. So if you could hyperlink mine too, would love to hear from folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. We're LinkedIn's great. We love talking shop. We love sharing what we've learned and learning more, right? So we're always happy to roll up sleeves with folks in the industry for sure.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you so much again. And to everyone that's listened this week, we shall catch you next week.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights. If you want to learn more, subscribe to our newsletter and we'll deliver every episode straight to your inbox. If you have any questions, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Our links will be in the episode notes. See you next week.